The voluntarist philosophy has at its foundation two principles from which the ethical nature of any and all human action is determined. The first of these two is the principle of self-ownership, which states that we are the exclusive controllers and therefore owners of our own sovereign bodies. And by extension, we also own our actions and the effects of those actions. From this line of reasoning, we are able to derive the criteria for legitimate property acquisition and titling. In short, property may only be acquired through the acts of original appropriation or voluntary contractual exchange. Now, the second principle is that of non-aggression, otherwise known as the NAP. This principle grants each person the natural right to live free of coercive or aggressive interference by another individual. Coercion here is defined as the explicit application or threat of harm to a person's body or property by another human being. From this principle, we may conclude that for an act to be considered criminal, requires a victim of coercion, as previously defined. In short, if there is no victim, then there may be no crime. Now, accordingly, voluntarists must also be advocates of anarchism, as the inherent nature of any state requires it to be at odds to some degree of the two aforementioned principles. And this will be demonstrated by the brief examination of three inherent traits of the state. The first of which is the state is the ultimate arbitrator or dispute settler for any and all conflicts, to include those involving itself. It is also the single entity empowered to set the criteria, through law, by which all conflicts must ultimately be resolved. And furthermore, it retains the exclusive power to alter these criteria at its whim. This power is in conflict with the principle of self-ownership, as it asserts unconsented to dominion over others. It is also in conflict with the non-aggression principle, since coercion is the enforcement method of such power. Now, second is the social contract. This idea attempts to assert that people are contractually obliged to submit to the edicts of the state, even absent their explicit consent. A tacit consent is assumed to the general populace by the state. However, even if such consent were possible or able to be objectively determined, surely the state as an interested party would not be the proper authority to make such a call due to what would be a clear conflict of interest. And third is the state's power of taxation. The state, as a self-proclaimed agency of property and life protection, must necessarily exist in a state of utter paradox and self-contradiction. That is to say, the state must take from people their property under the threat of coercion before it may protect the lives and property of all of its constituents, then it has failed before it has even begun. Such an act, when spoken about plainly, would be seen as completely absurd by any rational and objective measure. And in conclusion, the act of taxation is tantamount to theft, and stands in clear violation of both the NAP and the principle of self-ownership.